Hello there and welcome to another edition of the Evening Review. My name is Okito Greg and in studio with me this evening I have Mr. Tiaan Bazuin. He is the CEO of the NSX. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. The NSX is not the Namibia Stock Exchange, it's the Namibia Securities Exchange. What's the difference? What does that mean?
Well, we started off as a stock exchange when we only had stocks, meaning the shares in companies that were traded on market. But subsequently, we've issued multiple bonds, both government as well as corporates, and they are also now trading on market. We have an electronic trading system whereby the banks and the brokers are able to trade those on market, and thereby giving the same regulatory oversight and assurances that they will clear and settle in an orderly fashion.
Okay, excellent. And you've been at the head of the NSX for a good number of years now. How has it changed? I mean, you've given us a little bit of insight already with your first answer, but how has it changed since you started there and what has it's become now?
Fundamentally, what's changed is it's diversified the offering to the public and to our institutional investors substantially. So like I said, initially it was only stocks in the local companies and a couple of dual listed companies. Subsequently, we've got ETFs where you can invest in precious metals from gold to palladium to silver.
Okay.
And in addition to that, there's also exchange traded notes, ETNs, that can give you exposure to dollar-based international companies and indices and to diversify the investment portfolio substantially.
Wow.
So it's come a long way. The next step is the Central Securities Depository, which we are busy launching together with the Bank of Namibia, which will move away from the paper certificates, which is very antiquated, and move to an electronic clearing and settlement system. That will mean that in connecting with the banks, the seller will get the money that he's selling for, and the buyer will get the electronic ownership of the shares at exactly the same time. So you take all the risk out of the system.
Wow, that's brilliant. And how has participation grown? Are more Namibians buying and selling shares now?
Every time we do an IPO, so be it the last one with MTC or Standard Bank before that, or even Bank Windhoek many years ago, we see the numbers going up. So the retail participation in terms of members of the public actually taking part in that IPO process has definitely gone up quite a lot. So what we're seeing now with IPOs is many thousands of people, many of them for the first time, buying a share in an IPO, and then either holding it for a long time and getting the benefits of the dividends as well as the capital appreciation as the price hopefully goes up. It's not to say it always does. There's always risk in any investment. But then you see more and more people starting to take part in the market in that fashion.
Excellent, excellent. And also in general, do you find that people understand trading in stocks and securities better these days, or is there still work to do?
There's always work to do, definitely. Again, most of the times when we have an IPO, we usually have a quite broad explanation as to what is a stock. It's a fractional ownership of a company. What's a dividend? It's where you share in the profits, that type of thing. But also, I think a lot of people have gotten introduced to the concept in recent years, be it through crypto or whatever else, where this concept of trading has certainly picked up steam. And people are looking at it in a different way in terms of understanding that generational wealth is created by investing at an early age. The later you start thinking about your retirement, the less time there is to actually make a plan and start putting funds away. So whether it's starting with a savings account when you're still at school, and getting into an IPO or getting into trading at an early age, I think there's immense value in that. And we've done something called the Scholars Investment Challenge for the last, I think about 25 years now, where we had, initially it was just schools, and later on we've invited the universities as well to get young people introduced to the capital market and actually start seeing the benefits of investing and trading.
Awesome, awesome. Now, part of the reason why I asked you to join us on Evening Review is because recently the NSX appeared in a government gazette about a fundamental change that's happening. Could you walk us through that, please?
Sure. So the concept that was published in the Gazette in terms of our proposed rule amendments is called demutualization. So as it stands, the exchange is still a members association, which is very much how most exchanges started hundreds of years ago. However, from a regulatory perspective, it's been determined that that type of what they used to call a boys' club is not a healthy way for an exchange to actually exist.
Okay.
In our case, it's not so much that it was a boys' club and it was controlled by the stockbrokers, because ours was set up a little bit differently in that we had founder members that were not stockbrokers. So the exchange is not controlled by the stockbrokers. We actually have an independent corporate setup, so same as a company would have.
Okay.
However, the principle still applies that it's better for exchanges to be a listed company or just be a company as if we, and I always put it this way, if I want a lot of Namibian companies to become listed companies,
yes,
then why shouldn't we do the same?
Yes.
So the first step is then demutualizing and becoming a company,
okay,
with the intent that also we would like to list one day. So the JSE, for example, is listed on the JSE.
Oh,
so their regulator
yeah,
does what the stock exchange does for companies, but they also make their shareholding available to the public, which is something I wish more Namibian companies would do.
So after this process, the NSX would become a company with shareholders?
Yes.
And those shareholders could be average Namibians who could purchase a share in the NSX.
So what initially will happen is those founder members and then the trading members that we have now, they will become shareholders.
Okay.
And then as a public company, they will be able to sell those shares. So when we list, that's a great time to either do an IPO, do a capital raise, or make more shares available to more people. But initially, those members will become shareholders and they will then be able to sell their shares, yes.
Oh, very interesting. Tell me, the relationship between the NSX or any country's stock exchange or securities exchange and their economy, is it reflective? If your economy is strong, then your stock exchange is strong? It works that way?
On a macroeconomic level, usually the two speak to each other. However, there can also be disconnects. If we look at what's happening in America now, you'll see some statistics indicate that the general public might be feeling the pinch in terms of how inflation has gone up and them struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
However, the stock exchange is doing very well.
Yes.
But that's largely because of the AI boom. So you've got a couple of companies that are doing really well, while the rest are actually not necessarily doing that well. In a normal situation, and I think what we see in ours, is when you see companies perform well, if they do well financially, then typically their share price goes up and the stock exchange does well.
Yes.
So it is very much, it's maybe more of a business sentiment than an average, than a generalized economic view. But certainly if the businesses do well, if their financial performance is there, then you would see a rise in price.
What I'm trying to get at is, as a patriotic Namibian, if I have confidence in our economy and the outlook of it, it might make sense for me to invest in the stock exchange itself.
Absolutely. And again, if you look at ours versus some other countries, there's different valuation criteria that you can use to see in relation to the performance of the stock, where's the price? So a price to earnings ratio is one of those calculations where you can see, okay, so the company is making so much per share and I see it going up every year, 10, 15%, whatever it is. Now I compare, this one is a 7.5 price to earnings ratio compared to a similar one in South Africa maybe, and that one is 8 or 9 or 10. Then obviously this one, if I'm going to hold it for a long time, might well be a better buy. So again, if you're going to look and analyze stocks to buy, you want to take a view on a type of business and an investment that you can understand.
Yes.
So I can understand what MTC does. I'm a customer of theirs. I can understand what Paratus does. I'm a customer of theirs. I can understand what the banks do. I'm a customer of theirs. And if I can do some of those metrics to value the stock with, hopefully, with assistance from a professional like a stockbroker, then it places you in a position to take a view on it.
Very interesting. Do you think that there might also be a reverse correlation in the sense that if lots of Namibians go to invest in the NSX, it might have a boost for the economy in the general?
It's the balance between the buy and the sell side of the market. So if you have a lot more people coming to buy, and that's why we try to develop the international market as well. We actually want internationals to come and to buy and to want.
Yes.
Then it raises the price. Because if you have more buyers than sellers, the price goes up. If you have more sellers than buyers, the price goes down.
Yeah, and one of the things about ownership is also that you take a lot more interest and that might help to encourage good governance and good management.
It's twofold on that one. I always encourage companies to think about doing share employee schemes. And if you've done that, you want those shares to have a market determined price.
Okay.
So it's one thing to allow your employees to buy into the company. But if that means after 10 years, they can only sell it back to the same company, there's never a market price that's been determined.
Yes.
The market price is typically much higher than an NAV calculation or something like that.
Okay.
So that's step one in terms of empowering your own people. And the second one is actually the transparency that comes with being a public company and being listed.
Yes.
So your financial statements and everything becomes public. You have research analysts that look at it and take a view on it, take a view on the forward-looking nature of it and what the revenue should look like, what the growth would look like. And that usually leads to better outcomes. So you have the corporate governance side of things, whereby it's not one single owner making all the decisions, right or wrong, his way or the highway. You bring in some additional voices and thoughts and have a more strategic outlook, which research has showed that listed companies outperform unlisted companies by quite a wide margin.
Okay.
And it's because of a combination of all those three. Having all people have skin in the game, the transparency and the analysis that comes with it, and the corporate governance factor in terms of having additional qualified voices help you in the strategy of the company and not just go it alone.
Wow, that's very interesting. But I think we're going to take a quick commercial break right here, and we'll be back in a few minutes to continue this conversation, so please stay with us. Welcome back to the Evening Review. My name is Ogito Greig, and in the studio with me this evening, I have the CEO of the NSX, Mr. Tiaan Bazuin, and he's here explaining to us all the intricacies of the Security Exchange of Namibia. Thank you very much. Please explain to us a little bit about the makeup of the offering that is available on the NSX these days. There are mining companies, big mining companies, and I was under the impression that when the mine gets big enough, it has to list. Is that the case?
I wish that was the case. No, it's not. That would make my life a lot easier. On mining, you have different stages of mining. So you usually have the exploration phase, and we have a lot of dual listings of those especially. So basically what they do is they put the business case together as to whether there's enough of whatever the ore is that's going to be mined to actually build a mine and produce enough to carry it through.
Yes.
So those typically start off out of Toronto or Australia.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is they have all kinds of incentives for those companies to do their initial capital raising there. Because remember, these are greenfields. There's no mine built yet.
Yes.
They're doing testing samples and whatever. They need to raise a lot of money to do that. So it's high risk. And those two jurisdictions typically get all of that business. Like I said, there's tax incentives and all kinds of reasons why that works. It's also very specialized.
Yes.
So we tend to get them to do a list if they're doing something here so that they can disseminate the information and see if there's an appetite locally.
Yes.
So most recently, we actually saw Usino do a local capital raise for that project that they ended off selling to the Chinese.
Okay.
And I mean, they from the capital raise to when they sold it, I think was around 6 months, and people doubled their money.
Wow.
It was an exceptional, high risk, high reward example.
Situation.
It doesn't always work that way. But that was great. And so I think that market is developing locally.
Okay.
And although the pension funds wouldn't necessarily be allowed to invest in those because of their mandate, because that's certainly a little bit more conservative, I think there's a market that's developing there. And then, of course, once that type of project gets sold, for example, Husab is owned by the nuclear power company, which is owned by the government
of China.
And they're supplying themselves with uranium.
Yes.
So they certainly don't always list.
Okay.
It depends who takes it up.
Yes.
So if you have a big mining company like the Anglo-Americans of the world, then they can build a mine and you can buy those shares and you can trade in it. But oftentimes it gets bought by parties that wouldn't share the shareholding.
Okay, which industries in Namibia are generally listed, and which ones do you find that they don't list much at all?
Okay, so on the mining companies, we have a lot of dual listings.
Yeah.
On financial services, we have a lot of local, almost all the banks are listed.
Okay.
And that's because Bank of Namibia encouraged them to actually list.
Good.
So you've seen a lot of those IPOs coming through. We used to have nothing in ICT. Now we've got MTC and Paratus. So that's come through nicely as an industry. It's certainly a growth industry. It's performed very well. So currently we have nothing in tourism.
Okay.
It's certainly something we're working on that I'm sure we'll get to announce something along those lines soon enough. And then, you know, on the retail side, you have Model, Woermann-Brock. We have the internationals, which you can invest in the holding company, but we don't see anything locally there. I always think, and the case study was actually done with Vodacom, is if you allow your clients to become shareholders, it's probably the best way to connect them to your company forever.
Yes.
Same goes for the employees. So again, you know, I certainly want to see more companies come to market. I mean, Pupkewitz, you go through the list. We have a lot of brands that we engage with constantly that doesn't allow the public to take part in the growth of the business. And I think it's almost imperative for a Namibian company to open up its shareholder base and allow its clients to take part in its shareholding.
But what is the risk that, what's that term, an aggressive takeover, or what? If I've built a company over 30 years, and I'm growing, things are looking up.
Yeah.
But now I'm a bit worried that I'm going to open up and then...
Yeah. So that's not something that typically would just happen in a listed company. So the free float requirement, meaning the amount that must be available for people to just buy and sell between each other is only 15%.
Oh, okay.
It's 20%, 30% some places. So the bare minimum would be 15%, normal is 20%. So if you're talking about that, that means the existing shareholders are not at risk of being pushed out by the people that are coming along. If you buy shares in a listed company, the idea is not for you to actually go and sit and say, I think we should be doing this.
Yeah.
The idea is if you like it, then you stay a shareholder. If you don't like it, then you sell it to somebody who wants to be one. So there's a fundamental difference there in the role of the shareholder. So some things will go to an annual general meeting and invite input. That's fine. But you're not going to take it over by buying 100 shares in a company. No.
Okay. You know, there's a perception about being a shareholder that it's a very exclusive club. Not everybody can participate. What's the reality in terms of the NSX and in terms of what can be done here in Namibia?
Look, I mean, obviously you need some disposable income to actually be able to buy the shares. That's the fundamental. And that's why I say employee share schemes should be fundamentally important in terms of getting more people to be involved in the companies that they work at, but also then giving them the opportunity to actually sell those shares on the open market. So like I say, it's been growing exponentially, and people are certainly starting to understand better what the value is in being a shareholder, and that as being an investment, as an alternative to a savings account or this or that. Of course, there's more risk in being a shareholder than there is to having a savings account. Savings account, you know exactly what you're going to get. With being a shareholder, that is not a given. You hope to get dividends if the company does well, but it's not to say it's always going to be. They might want to use the money that they've made to buy another company or to expand or whatever, and then they don't have a dividend. So it's not as predictable. But certainly there's much more upside in that than just having something like a savings account. So there's a bit of teaching and there's a little bit of push and pull in terms of people getting a company to market.
And I think from the shareholder's point of view, you also need to keep track of what's happening. You can't just, not like an investment, I mean, not like a savings where you just leave the money there and you look elsewhere. You got to pay attention to what the company is doing that you're invested in. But luckily through your rules, I get access to the information.
So that's one of the fundamental things that the stock exchange does, is to make sure that all shareholders and potential shareholders have the same information at the same time.
Okay.
So there's public disclosure of financial statements and declarations and everything else, so that you don't have a scenario where some people already know, oh, this is going to be a good year,
Yeah.
and the rest doesn't.
Uh-huh.
So there's closed periods when the people within the organization are not allowed to trade,
Okay.
when they know something that the rest of the market will not yet know, and only once it's public, then everybody's allowed to trade again.
So you create a...
So that's part of the regulated market that I'm talking about.
I see, I see. And from the things you've told me, especially the advantages in terms of governance and in terms of outcomes in general, I'm wondering, is it not possible then for state-owned enterprises to also list and put a little bit of their shareholding on the market?
Well, I mean, MTC, we did exactly that. Government sold off a substantial stake in MTC.
Uh-huh.
So it can be done, it has been done. Throughout Africa, there's a push towards that, especially when you get, and MTC was a very good example of this. MTC was created at a time when no mobile operator wanted to come and set up a network in Namibia. They said too few people, too big a country.
Yeah.
So government partnered up with a telco to say, okay, but we really want it to be done. And they set it up.
Yes.
Became profitable, everything else. Eventually, even the partner left. They went through a few different telco partners. And then they said, okay, well, now it's up and running and everything's doing well. Now we can actually sell off a stake.
Yeah.
So in cases where the market doesn't function well and the private sector doesn't provide a service, then government is almost forced into that position. But they don't have to stay there once it's working.
I see.
And then in other cases, I mean, our government is involved in various areas in the economy where they don't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So then this would be an option for them to get out of some of those areas. Of course, again, your audit needs to be in order. Your finances need to be right. There's certain basic elements that has to be right before you can offer it to the public.
Uh-huh.
But MTC was a wonderful example and it did exceptionally well.
Because I'm thinking of some state-owned enterprises where in my mind it's hard to imagine that the public could be involved. Take for instance a crucial one being Transnamib. You know, there's a lot of talk about how much we need Transnamib to get on the right track.
Yeah.
And it just, years pass. But would it be possible for such a type of company to list?
So there's all kinds of options there. So you could do a public-private partnership where you actually just make some of the shares available. However, then it needs to be run right and people need to be comfortable that they're making a good investment.
Yeah.
But you've seen different examples. You've seen cases where the rail lines have been completely privatized. And then, I believe in the UK, you saw it actually being nationalized again.
Yeah.
Because once you have a business monopoly, then they can abuse it.
Yes.
But on the other side, if it's not performing the function that it should, then maybe privatization is the better option. So there's trade-offs in all of this. So there are certain industries that are really of strategic importance that is unlikely to be privatized. I mean, if NAM Water were to privatize, that would be obviously a monopoly.
Yes.
And that you would have a risk that whoever owns it can just say, well, in that case, let's double the prices and we'll make more money. That you can't have that scenario playing out.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't apply for everything, but I think there are quite a few that would certainly do well.
Do you think it would benefit a state-owned enterprise which is doing fairly well at the moment? I'm thinking, for instance, of Namport, which needs a lot of capital because we need to expand the harbors. Do you think they could also benefit from listing?
For sure. Look, I think, and just to be fair, it's not only when the company is listing that capital markets come into play. Many of our state-owned enterprises have bond programs whereby they are issuing bonds, which means their financials are already public. It's not like these are secret numbers. And international investors are already taking a view on these companies as to whether to fund the bonds. So those same investors may well be interested if there were some shares available.
Could you give me some examples of those?
So NAM Power has a bond program.
Okay.
They've raised, they've done a few issuances. NAM Water, Telkom had one. There's quite a few actually.
Wow, wow. In terms of where the world is going, stock exchanges around the world, how do you see the world market changing? What are the trends?
Well, the biggest trend right now is cryptocurrency. And most of that trading is happening on unregulated exchanges.
Okay.
And the reason for that is regulated markets are trying to come to terms and trying to get that market to a stage where it's safe enough to actually invest. Because the way people are investing currently is probably going onto some site, accessing a marketplace and buying cryptocurrency, in which case you don't necessarily know whether what it's given you on the screen, whether you've actually bought it or not. So you've paid money, but you don't have some sort of a real knowledge to know that you certainly can't hold it and feel it.
Yeah.
Secondly, then, it's being traded on an exchange such as FTX and many of the others, which have been proven to misallocate funds or misuse funds or whatever you want to call it. So that's risky as well. It's held in a crypto wallet where if you lose the key, I mean, that's the end of that. But also some of those wallets have been hacked. So that's not necessarily safe and secure either. So each link in the chain has certain uncertainties attached to it, which makes it very difficult to trade on a regulated market. So some of the in America they've got some ETFs that have been approved, but the risk is lying in BlackRock or one of these massive companies that's actually doing the trading. So if they make a mistake on one of those links, then they're actually carrying it on their balance sheet.
I see.
It's not the underlying. So that's been the biggest disruptive force throughout the world in the last couple of years. But finding a safe way to do that is easier said than done.
I believe you. This is very interesting conversation, and it sounds like it's just getting juicy, but we've just about run out of time. Do you have a last thing that you want to say to our audience?
I think generally, I mean, the diversification angle that we've done has gone very well. But what we need is more Namibian local companies to actually come to market. We need depth in the market, because the more companies there are, the more investors can actually choose between stocks, and it creates more trading, more liquidity. And that's why I think there's almost an obligation, if you're an employee in a company, whether you're an owner in a company or not, to look forward to say, what am I doing in terms of creating a market value for what a share is worth? Because your NAV upon your financial is not the same as a market value. And listing is the most proven way to unlock that market value and create a proper valuation of your company.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for joining us on the Evening Review. Join us again tomorrow evening. For now, good night.